East side, B side, what side are you on?
Have you ever thought to yourself, man, I sure would like to make a podcast. I've got so much to say about blank. Well, if you haven't heard about Anchor, you really should. It is the easiest way to make a podcast, and it's absolutely free. All right, I'm going to tell you why it's so easy. Okay, so with Anchor, there's creation tools that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many others. And you can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Trust me, I'm so excited about this. You can be too. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. Hey, and welcome back to another episode of A-Side, B-Side podcast. How's it going, Adam?
It's good, Brooke. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. I see you have finally joined the ranks of fellow merch holders.
I've been working extra this week to cover some shifts. I decided to splurge a little bit.
Of course, you can always log on to our website. It's a great way to support the show, A-Side, B-Side podcast.square.site. We've got all kinds of goodies on there. Sweatshirts, t-shirts, puzzles, blankets, coffee mugs. So since you've been working a lot this week, have you had a chance to check out anything new?
I really haven't. It's been NCAA tournament, both men's and women's, and lots of work. I did discover this series on Hulu that I've added to my queue, but I have not started watching. But evidently, there's 3 seasons of it, and it's called Genius. And the first season is about Albert Einstein, I think. But the one that caught my eye is a biography series about various famous influential people, and this season is about Aretha Franklin. So I added that to my list, and I'm super excited to kind of dive into that. It looks like it's not just a biography or using found footage. They have actors portray some of the roles and
is
kind
this
of
the
tell
one
their
with
story.
Cynthia Erivo in it playing Aretha?
I believe so. Yeah. So that is on my list to start.
Cool.
Yeah, I had never heard of, and I guess, like I said, there's 3 seasons. Totally missed it. So I've been on Hulu watching Elementary this last couple of weeks, and it popped up in one of the ads, and I was like, well, that looks really interesting.
Speaking of Hulu, Handmaid's Tale comes back next month. I think lots of people are excited and ready for that because it's been almost 2 years now since the last one. I finally got around to watching Antebellum with Janelle Monáe. And that's a Jordan Peele. That's another Jordan Peele one. And, it got a lot of mixed reviews, but I'd heard a lot of bad reviews on it initially. And I figured I watched it because I went to watch Nomadland on Hulu. And then I saw that one come up as well. So I was like, well, I'll just make a day of it. And I watched both. Nomadland, very good, but it's slow.
Yeah.
Don't expect explosions and police chases and shoot 'em ups or anything like that. It's a very character driven movie. Frances McDormand is really good in it, but it's just about it's a slice of life story. So just know it's not exciting, but it's a good story.
Right. Yeah. Just got to know the style that you're going into.
Right. But I actually rather enjoyed Antebellum. Very Jordan Peele, and that means that there's, of course, a message behind the movie. So that is the case with every Jordan Peele movie, it seems, since Get Out. And but I enjoy it. I mean, I enjoyed it. I didn't hate it. It was not what I was expecting at all. And some good twists and turns. Janelle Monáe did a pretty good job. A bunch of the other actors, I don't know their names. You see them in bit roles. But yeah, I thought it was pretty good.
It always seemed like one of those movies that just didn't work well as a trailer.
No.
There was too much to really put into 60 seconds for people to really get. It's when it's a superhero movie, it's like, hey, look, good guy. Hey, look, bad guy. They fight. I mean, you can get that across pretty quick, but sometimes movies are just too involved to really work as a trailer. And sometimes I think that that works against them. And then studios will try to make the trailer seem like it's something it's not to be so more exciting.
Yeah, that's kind of the case here. I mean, there's not much, they really couldn't do much with the trailer because I feel like it would give it away.
Yeah, there was so much going on.
I did hear about Minnesota's new law. You guys are real cutting edge, aren't ya? You know, the new law where if someone is drinking or they take drugs, it can't be considered rape.
Yeah, that was not a great moment for our state, and hopefully that's something that the legislature can adjust the law so it is not interpreted that way, because it sounds like it was a very poorly written law.
I hope that's all it is, because that sucks. That someone who has been drinking, even if I don't care how much they've had to drink. I don't care if they're blackout drunk or had a sip, but because they took a drink, if they have non-consensual relations, it's not really considered non-consensual because they had a drink.
Yeah, it's completely absurd, and I don't understand how a law could even make that a potential thing that you think is an outcome. I don't know how we got here.
Go Minnesota! Way to be progressive. Speaking of Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, it's just for a state we have a very strong divide politically, where you've got some people on the very edges of both sides. So I just don't. It's weird because it's not like this was a law that anyone had heard about, that this had been discussed before. So it kind of felt like it blindsided everybody. So I'm still trying to figure out how we got to this point and how this has not been a story before it gets to the Supreme Court.
Phew. But bringing it back to the good news, second episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier was really good.
And got a lot more going into a little bit more of the history and some of the backstory and some of the, we've gotten the really polished, version of the Captain America story. And there's a lot more gray area that luckily the comics have delved into over the last, 15, 20 years, after really not doing a whole lot with it for, 50, 60. So it's encouraging to see the series taking some of those newer stories and weaving them into the, mythos of Captain America.
Of course, even if you haven't watched it, you've of course seen the memes of the new Captain America. That is actually Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell's son.
Yeah, I had no idea they had a kid. I guess he's been in a bunch of stuff.
Oh, he has. He's usually, the reason he's unrecognizable is he usually has long hair and a long scruffy beard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But he definitely looks like his dad when a couple times in this episode. You're like, oh, there's Kurt Russell.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that's also Kate Hudson's brother, because of Goldie Hawn. But so I have made the joke that the new Captain America and his buddy look like the Walmart version of Captain America and Black Panther.
Yeah, it's certainly Captain America, and Battlestar is his sidekick. Mm-hmm. The new Captain America, played by John Walker, is the character's name, not the actor. The actor
Wyatt Russell is the actor's name.
So they come straight out of the comics, but they sure look like, when you were going to go get the Legos, but they were out of Legos. So you got that thing that looked kind of like Legos, but wasn't as good, but still had like the blocks with the points on them.
You ordered them from Wish.
Yeah. It's like almost like I have one of my favorite stocking caps that I've ever gotten. I bought at a street market in New York City, and it is a knockoff, stocking cap, and it's got Harry Potter, but it's spelled Herry, and instead of Harry, it's just clearly a knockoff, so they wouldn't have to. This is kind of how I feel about the new Captain America and Battlestar. They're like just quite there, but not really all the way there. It's like, it's not a Rolex, it's a Rolex or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty close, but you could tell it's not really the genuine article.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't want to do any spoilers or anything, but I don't remember Captain America using a gun a whole lot, and that's already something that the new guy has done. So that to me was a pretty obvious change.
It'll be interesting. I do love, which I kind of was expecting with this anyway, the whole buddy cop. There is definitely a very buddy cop movie feel to this, but it's different because they're superheroes. But there was like I don't want to give any spoilers, but there was a really funny scene with where there's this forced interaction between Falcon and Winter Soldier. And it's really pretty funny. Those two actually have a very good chemistry together on screen.
Yeah, I think that's why it works, because it would be so easy if the actors didn't have chemistry and or the characters didn't have chemistry, for people to just kind of get annoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Like buddy cops movies only work when you like both characters and actors and you want to see it work. Otherwise, it's just like one of my favorite movies to love hate is Tango and Cash. And you've got Sylvester Stallone and is it Kurt Russell?
It is Kurt Russell speaking of.
Kurt Russell. And they do not have much chemistry at all. And it really drags down the movie. And you feel like it could be good, and I wanted it to be good, and I've watched it so many times, and I still kind of love it, but it's just it really feels like the two actors are not having any fun, and they do not like what they were both like, I need the paycheck. Which, hey, nothing against that. I do a lot of things because I need a paycheck.
Yeah. Real quick before we get into the episode, a couple of trailers dropped today because of course Regal theaters are opening up again next month tomorrow. Well, not tomorrow, but next month starts tomorrow. But yeah, Regal theaters are opening, and I think movie studios are excited. Of course, Godzilla vs. Kong is now out and on HBO Max. So if you have HBO Max, you don't have to pay extra. It'll be on there for 30 days. But some interesting trailers dropped. So I already mentioned Handmaid's Tale. Season 4 is coming out next month. But Spiral, which is like a Saw sequel spinoff, and it's got Chris Rock and Sam L. Jackson.
Ooh.
Which is really like, imagine the two of them in a movie, and to top it off, they're in a Saw movie. I mean, it's pretty cool. There's only certain horror that I can do, and that is one. Like, I like psychological thrillers, and that to me is more psychological thriller than horror.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jason Statham, who was not voted sexiest bald man in the world, nor was The Rock, nor was Boris Kojo. It was Prince William. I don't agree with that. Sorry.
Wow. What?
Yeah.
I don't agree with that. I mean, that feels like the monarchy set that up to be like, hey, don't pay attention to Harry.
Yeah, there's so many other bald, sexy dudes. Like, well, Prince William?
There's probably other bald princes.
Right.
There's got to be somebody sitting down in Monaco. You know that.
Seriously. Like, you have literally Shamar Moore. You have Common. You have Jason Statham. You have The Rock. And you were like, Prince William. Yeah. Yep. That's it.
Yeah. So that's a total setup.
But anyway, I'm just like oh, whatever.
Megan's on Oprah. Well, we'll do this. That'll show him.
Yeah, seriously. We're going to name Prince William sexiest bald man alive. No, not even in England. Okay. Yeah. Not even in England.
Probably not even in the palace. There's probably like a security guard who's just like jacked. You know, they're like, hey, that guy's really attractive.
So Jason Statham has a new movie, and it's called Wrath of Man. And of course, it's the most Jason Statham of movies. And I believe it's a Guy Ritchie directed, which they do really well together anyway, Guy Ritchie and Jason Statham. So, it looks really good. Post Malone is actually in it, and the trailer gets taken out, which I was like, ha! Not that I don't like Post Malone, because, I mean, you know, he's fine or whatever, but it was just funny. It was just yeah.
Josh Hartnett is also in it. Evidently, Josh Hartnett is still in
Yes. You know what? Josh Hartnett kind of made a comeback when Quibi was around because he was in the Kevin Hart little action comedy show with John Travolta.
He's a Minnesota boy.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, he's come into our restaurant.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay, I guess that's enough movie talk besides the A side, that is.
Yeah. Which is all about movies today.
All right. So, episode 38 means you're up first.
And that means I'm first up to bat, which is a theme that we will continue through the entire A side, as this is one of my favorite weeks of the year. And it didn't even happen last year, which means that this year I'm even more excited than normal. And that is because tomorrow, April 1st, which is April Fool's Day, but I forgot about that completely, is the opening day for Major League Baseball. And since I was a little kid, the opening day of Major League Baseball is probably a bigger holiday to me than almost any other actual holiday in the entire year. Tomorrow, there will be every team will play a game. So there will be all 32 teams playing baseball tomorrow. And there will be on ESPN a 4-game doubleheader. So I will probably watch baseball for 12 consecutive hours, 12, 15 hours, depending on how long the games go. And it got me thinking about how I really got into baseball when I discovered this love of the game and why there was this big period of time in my life where I just kind of ignored baseball. And as I was kind of digging into it, I was also thinking like, hey, I got to do a A-side this week. And there are so many great baseball movies. Why don't I say, my top 5 baseball movies, which I thought would be really easy. Then as I started to write them down, I noticed a very strange trend. And it became this almost Twilight Zone type of thing where I looked at a 4-year period of my life and almost every baseball movie that I connected with came out from 1992 to 1994. And in 1991, it was the apex of my baseball love affair as the Minnesota Twins won the World Series in an epic 7-game series against the Atlanta Braves. I was so intense watching the games that my parents made me go downstairs. I watched by myself in the basement because I was jumping up and down and distracting and getting in front of the TV and screaming at the TV at the age of 10. So they could watch it upstairs without me distracting them. We actually were so frustrated with the national broadcasters and how it felt like they were always cheering for the Braves instead of the Twins that we would watch the TV, but then turn on the local radio broadcast and everything was off by about a half second, if not a full second. So it was like kind of watching things in delay, and it was very strange. But that was probably the happiest moment of my childhood is when the Twins won the World Series. Maybe even Game 6 when Kirby Puckett hit a home run and Joe Buck says, "We'll see you tomorrow night," which I can still hear and see. I ran around the house. I was, literally ran out and just screaming out into the neighborhood, running around. It was probably the biggest moment. And then my love affair with baseball continued over the next 3 years because all of these movies came out about baseball. It felt like baseball was the one sport that Hollywood was focused on for the early 90s. So in 1992 alone, one of my favorite movies, period, but my favorite baseball movie, A League of Their Own, came out. I had absolutely no idea that there was a women's baseball league during the war, that any of this existed. I was blown away. I remember at first I thought it was a made-up story because I had never heard of it before, and I tried to read all these books about early baseball. I'd read autobiographies of, Pee Wee Reese and the Brooklyn Dodgers and Jackie Robinson and Duke Snider, and read about the Negro Leagues and Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson and Cool Papa Bell, who was the fastest man. And in fact, Satchel Paige had a quote about him once that said, Cool Papa Bell is so fast he can turn off the lights and get in bed before it's dark, which is still one of the coolest lines. Satchel Paige has some of the greatest quotes ever. But I had never heard. Yeah, I mean, and that's just like so clearly like this guy is ridiculously fast. But in all of that I had read, and I used to play this computer game called Earl Weaver Baseball, and they didn't have the license for any of the new players. So all of the teams were made up of players from the first like 50 years of the 1900s. Like one team was 19 to 1910, another team was 1911 to 1920, and they were like the all-star teams of these players from these decades way back before we had the biggest this 50s 60s where really baseball became as huge as it was. And so I knew all these names, but I'd never heard about a women's professional league. And I remember going to the theater with my family and watching the movie and absolutely loving every second of it. Tom Hanks gives an amazing performance, and it was kind of just this perfect moment where he was just on the precipice of his incredible run where he's getting nominated for Best Actor Oscars for everything he does. And he did this movie right before that. I was a huge Gina Davis fan after that. Madonna's in it. Lloyd Petty, Rosie O'Donnell. I mean, it is an incredible cast. One of the Cusacks. You've got even John Lovitz shows up, Gary Marshall, Bill Pullman. It is just a ridiculously awesome cast and a highly underrated movie. If you have not watched it in a long time, I highly recommend going back. So it's one of my favorite movies, period. And my number one baseball movie of all time is A League of Their Own, because it opened up my eyes and made me start looking for books and more information about this entire period of baseball that I didn't know about. Also that year, another movie that opened my eyes to a different type of baseball reality was a movie called Mr. Baseball, starring Tom Selleck. And Tom Selleck was always a favorite in my family because of Magnum P.I. I remember watching that when I was a little kid. I always wanted to be able to grow a mustache so I could look like him, and I've tried, and it looks nothing like him, so I do not currently wear a mustache. But Mr. Baseball tells the story of a slugger for the New York Yankees, Jack Elliott, who is at the end of his career and is getting replaced by this new hot prospect and gets sold to a team in the Japanese Baseball League. And it goes on to tell a story of this, American sort of fish out of water story, trying to bring his, understanding of how baseball is played and reconcile that with how baseball and traditions and rules are different in the Japanese Baseball League and culture clash. And there's also a little bit of a romance story in there, but it really opened up my eyes to a whole nother world of baseball beyond just the, US version that I had seen before. Tom Selleck does an incredible job being both believable as a baseball player and also, annoying enough and sort of gruff enough that you could see how he would rub people the wrong way, but has this sort of over time, this complex character that evolves, and the relationship with his head coach, who is also the record holder for the home runs in one season that Jack is is about to break. Is really interesting. And Dennis Haysbert who would go on to be the president on 24. And also, I think he's in all the Allstate commercials, is another player on his team, American player who is playing in Japan. It's a highly underrated movie. I think it gets forgotten in baseball because it doesn't have some of the big names. The Major League Baseball is only mentioned sort of tangentially. But it is highly underrated, and I also came out in 1992. And as I'm going through, I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of neat. Two movies that I associated with baseball and we had on VHS and would watch on every road trip in the summer. Both came out in 92. That's kind of interesting. Not a big, huge trend there. And then I was like, okay, well, let's look at some other ones. So another movie that I watched all the time about baseball in the 90s was The Sandlot. It came out in 1993. It is often considered the most pure baseball movie about kids playing a pickup game in a yard and the love of baseball and youth and friendship. And everybody knows, the scenes where the baseball goes over the fence and the dog gets it, or when they're trying to tell the kid who doesn't know about baseball about Babe Ruth and all the nicknames and Squints, who then fakes drowning so Wendy Peppercorn, the lifeguard, can come save him. It is as much about childhood as it is about baseball, but baseball's always sort of the background that they put the context that gives us these stories of these kids. And it came out in 1993, and I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. It's just another 1 year away from the last two movies we saw. And I was like, okay, well, it was another one, Rookie of the Year, which tells the story of a kid who has an accident and hurts his elbow, but suddenly becomes a incredible pitcher because he can throw the ball so fast. It is possibly the least believable baseball movie, other than maybe say like Angels at the Outfield, where literal angels are helping the California Angels win baseball games. The kid becomes a pitcher in the major league, drops out of middle school, and becomes a Major League Baseball player and gets the Cubs almost all the way to the playoffs. It's got a great cast. Thomas Ian Nicholas, who played the main character, would go on to be in tons of stuff, most famously American Pie, which came out a few years later. It was American Pie, right? Yeah, American Pie, and it was American Wedding, all of those. It's also got Gary Busey, which it's weird to think of Gary Busey in a baseball movie. Daniel Stern is in it, and it's got this great story of a kid who kind of lives every kid's dream. I mean, I remember going out thinking like, man, if I could just get in an accident where my arm gets messed up to the point where there's a tendon that's so stretched that I can throw the baseball 102 miles an hour, that would be the greatest thing ever. The other thing that would be great for a middle school kid is actually owning the Minnesota Twins. And when I was in 7th grade, that was a thing that Hollywood decided was a movie that everyone should go and watch, called Little Big League. Of course, the kid inherits the team, becomes the manager, even though he is, a 12-year-old kid. Timothy Busfield is probably the biggest star in the whole movie. Dennis Farina, Jason Robards, but it was filmed in Minnesota. In the mid-90s, Minnesota was doing all of these tax credits for films. So we got a bunch of films that were made here, including, Little Big League, Fargo, Grumpy Old Men, Jingle All the Way. There was another one, Feeling Minnesota. A whole bunch of movies were made in the 90s. Drop Dead Gorgeous was in Minnesota, and also there was a unofficial sequel that I cannot remember the name of that was also filmed in Minnesota. But it was the mid-90s. Everybody was getting tax breaks to film here. And so they filmed this entire movie in the Metrodome. And I remember we tried to get in as extras, because there's a scene in the movie where, they're showing all the crowd. And they basically just put out a radio ad saying, hey, everybody come down to the Metrodome, and the first 10,000 people will get to be in this movie. And I tried to convince my parents to go, and it didn't work out. So I didn't get to be in a movie. But it was weirdly perfect for Hollywood to say, hey, you could be a middle schooler and run the Major League Baseball team. In fact, it is the Major League Baseball team that you wish to run, the Minnesota Twins. And that came out in 1994. So you've got A League of Their Own, Mr. Baseball, both in 1993, Sandlot, Rookie of the Year in 1992. Sandlot and Rookie of the Year were in 1993, and Little Big League was in 1994. So 5 of the top 7 baseball movies of my life came out in a 3-year period. And this was like the height of baseball in pop culture. And I asked myself, what happened that suddenly baseball movies really don't get made like they were getting made in the early 90s? And the same thing that turned Hollywood off to baseball is the thing that led to me for about a 5 to 6 year period not really paying attention to baseball. And that was in the summer of 1994. Major League Baseball and the Players Association could not agree on a contract. The players went on strike. And in 1994, there was no World Series. The season ended. And I and a lot of other people became disenfranchised with baseball. They then went on to have talks of contracting the league and getting rid of teams and restructuring. And It wasn't until they decided to let everybody take steroids in the late 90s that anybody really started to come back to baseball. And in 1998, the Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire home run chase brought people back to the game. But I don't know that we will ever approach the heights of baseball as the national pastime and being in pop culture consciousness like we did in the early 90s ever again. So if you are excited about tomorrow's opening day and you're excited about baseball and you want to watch some movies from the heyday of baseball in pop culture, in my opinion, watch any of these 5 movies that came out from 1992 to 1994, and you'll see what could have been the peak that we will never see again of baseball in America's pop culture consciousness.
Awesome.
This is Kevin Armstrong, your host for Movie Battle. Each episode, we take 2 films and put a superfan of each against one another to decide which one is best. The only rule we have is that you come correct. If you're interested in being a guest on Movie Battle, please check us out on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter.
All right, so a few weeks back, we talked about the serial killer that Hannibal Lecter is based off of in England. His name is Robert Maudsley, even down to the prison cell that Hannibal is confined into. It's modeled after Robert's prison cell. So I kind of made the joke that you could kind of call him Hannibal, Dexter Lecter. Well, we have a real life Dexter on our hands, or that's actually his nickname, is the Brazilian Dexter.
Okay.
His name is Pedro Rodrigues Filho. He was born July 17th of 1954. He's also known as Pedrinho Matador, or Killer Petey. He was actually born on a farm in Santa Rita do Supacar, the south of Minas Gerais, with a bruised skull. And the reason for that is because his father was such a great man. Not really. His father was so abusive, he actually kicked Pedro's mother during a fight in the midst of her pregnancy.
Oh.
The abuse from his father continued throughout his childhood. Pedro reportedly began having feelings like these murderous feelings at a really early age. And I'm sure it's because of TBI, traumatic brain injury, which is one of the things we have talked about that leads to serial killers. He had no choice. He was born that way. I mean, I'm not excusing him, but he was literally born that way.
Right.
So again, he reportedly started having murderous feelings at like a really early age. Allegedly, he had wanted to kill the first time around the age of 13. He was in a fight with an older cousin, and he pushed this cousin into a sugar cane press, almost killing him. When Pedro was 14, his father, who was a school guard at the local high school, was fired by the deputy or the vice mayor of Alfinas for stealing food from the school kitchen. Well, in retaliation for what Pedro believed to be a wrongful accusation, Pedro, at the age of 14, killed the deputy mayor in front of City Hall with a shotgun that had belonged to his grandfather. Then, in a warped sense of justice, Pedro found the man who was suspected of being the actual thief, who was a security guard, and killed him.
Just for good measure.
So, again, it's a warped sense of justice. He was avenging his father by killing the deputy mayor, and avenging his father again by killing the person who was actually responsible. So he took out the person responsible because they were responsible and because it wronged his father.
He's covering all the bases.
So Pedro then fled to Moga de Cruces. It's in Greater Sao Paulo, where he went on to become a bit of a vigilante. So he starts robbing drug dens, and he actually killed a drug dealer while he was in Sao Paulo. So you can kind of get why they're calling him the Brazilian Dexter, because he is so far kind of taking out bad people. I mean, yes, in the case of drug dealers and stuff like that, but in the case of the mayor, the vice mayor, I mean, he thought that person had done wrong. So he has this weird sense of vigilante justice.
It's like the line from True Lies when somebody asks Arnold Schwarzenegger if he ever killed anyone, and he says, "Yeah, but they were all bad."
So while he's in Sao Paulo, Pedro meets Maria Aparecida Olympia, aka Botina, which is little boot or baby booty. And he completely falls in love with her. She reciprocates, the two fall in love, and they move in together. Pedro and Maria, they're living this happy lifestyle. And then, well, like any fairy tale, something bad happens. And unfortunately, Maria is murdered. She's murdered by gang members. We've already got a sense of Pedro's justice system.
Mm-hmm. Probably some bad news for these individuals.
I should add that Maria was also pregnant at the time of her death.
Ooh.
So in very John Wick fashion, Pedro sets out for vengeance. The only thing missing making this a John Wick story really is the dog.
Yeah.
So he starts off by torturing and killing several people, seeking out the responsible parties for Maria's death. It turns out it was a former rival gang leader. So Pedro and 4 friends paid this gang leader a little visit during a wedding. And they killed 7 people and wounded 16 others.
It's like Desperado.
Several months after the wedding massacre, or the Game of Thrones lingo, was it the Red Wedding?
The Red Wedding, yeah.
So Pedro discovered that his favorite cousin's boyfriend had gotten her pregnant, but refused to marry her. So Pedro, he went to talk to him, and fortunately for this guy, he convinced him, "Look, dude, you need to go ahead and marry my cousin." And the guy was like, "Okay, cool." No, not really. No, just kidding.
Didn't work out that way?
No. So I guess maybe that was the intention, but that's not how it ended. Pedro ended up shooting and killing him. At this time, Pedro's not even 18. So we have the security guard, the vice mayor. We also have the people from the wedding. So we've got the 7 people from the wedding. So that's 9 right there. We've also got a drug dealer. So we're up, and then the cousin's boyfriend. So we're up to what? 11 people at least? At least.
Yeah.
At least.
Before
he's 18.
Before he's 18.
Yeah. So next up, we've got yet another revenge killing. So you remember Pedro's dad, the one who kicked his mom while he was pregnant with him, right? Yeah. Causing this traumatic brain injury, and maybe the reason that Pedro is how he is. Mm-hmm. Well, during the time that Pedro was away, Pedro's father ended up killing Pedro's mother using a machete. So Pedro learned of his mother's death, and then he learned of his father's whereabouts. His father was in the city, in prison, in the city of Mogi. So Pedro goes to Mogi, to the jail, to visit his father, and he executes him. He stabs him 22 times. I guess 1 for every stab that his mother received, and then maybe an extra 1 for good measure, because Pedro's dad had stabbed his mom 21 times. According to a TV interview that Pedro had with journalist Marcelo Rezende, Pedro said on top of the 22 stab wounds, he then cut out his father's heart and chewed on a piece of it before spitting it out. Pedro's
Hannibal Lecter part.
Yeah. So Pedro's vigilante reign comes to an end on May 24th of 1973. Okay, not really. He was actually arrested, though. He was arrested on May 24th of 1973, and he was placed into the back of a police vehicle with 2 other criminals, one of which was a rapist. Now, we're up to at least 12 because he just killed his father.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when Pedro and the other criminals arrived at the police station and authorities opened the door, they found the rapist dead. Pedro, still handcuffed, took full responsibility for the death. I get it. He's a bad guy, but it's kind of hard because look at his victims.
Yeah.
I mean,
they're all bad.
They're all bad guys, even his dad. Like, I mean, I get it. It's your dad. You shouldn't kill your dad, but your dad killed your mom. And he kicked her in the stomach and caused you to have traumatic brain injury.
This guy's like the angel of death, just walking around striking people down.
So Pedro, during his incarceration, we're up to 13 now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it gets much higher than that. So Pedro, during his incarceration, killed 47 inmates. He was dubbed the criminal killer, taking out those he felt deserved retribution. Once he was ambushed by 5 prisoners. He killed 3 and wounded the other 2. One victim of his was a cellmate, a career criminal, and the reason he killed him, he snored too loudly.
Oh, I knew that was coming. As somebody who's a bad snorer, I was like, oh, it's going to be snoring. It's going to be a death of me someday.
It is a criminal offense. In an interview, he said he got a thrill and a joy out of killing other criminals. His favorite method to use was stabbing or hacking blades. Again, I get it. It's a bad dude, but notice what he said. A joy and thrill out of killing other criminals. He's not going after innocent people.
Yeah, no, he's just decreasing the surplus prison population.
So Pedro was sentenced to 128 years, but a Brazilian law on the books prohibits anyone from spending more than 30 years behind bars. So he was actually set for release in 2003. But in 1934, then President Getúlio Vargas signed a decree that, quote, allowed psychopaths to be maintained indefinitely in psychiatric establishments for treatment. That, along with the additional crimes that Pedro committed while incarcerated, added to his sentence. So it went from 128 to 400 years.
So just in case this guy's immortal, he's going to be in jail for a long time.
Right. Yeah. Well, you would think, right?
Yeah.
So, and he wasn't released in 2003 like he thought he was going to be. Psychiatrists say Pedro could be described as a psychopath, a person with no remorse and no compassion for others. Psychopaths also do not develop affection. So it could actually be argued that Pedro showing affection for both his mother and girlfriend would actually make him a sociopath. His affections were shown in the wanting of revenge for their deaths and moving in and falling in love with a girlfriend.
Yeah, that's having emotion.
Right.
Yeah.
So in 1982, he was actually diagnosed as a paranoid and antisocial character, with psychiatrists saying that his greatest motivation in life was the violent affirmation of oneself. So after being incarcerated for 34 years, Pedro finds freedom. Pedro was actually released on April 24th of 2007. He was arrested again on September 15th of 2011, but not for what you would think. He was actually arrested this time on charges of rioting and deprivation of liberty, aka false imprisonment.
So he made it 4 years.
Mm-hmm. And he didn't kill.
Yeah.
Pedro served until 2018 and was released again. Since his release, Pedro has his own YouTube channel. There's a documentary about him, and a film is in the works about his life. As far as we know, since his release, he hasn't murdered anyone. Maybe, being 66 now has kind of mellowed him out.
Well, yeah, and I mean, when you've killed 60 some people, because I mean, 47 in jail, and he had the 13 that we had before. I mean, maybe he's just like, oh man, I've done it all.
Maybe. The 1934 decree that we talked about was actually repealed on November 8th of 1990. Pedro appears to actually be inspiration for several characters on different episodes of Criminal Minds. On season 1, the unsub Vincent Peretta, on the episode called Natural Born Killers. The episode is about a prolific serial killer with an abusive father killing his first victim as a teen. Season 3, episode True Night, Johnny Mattel is a serial killer whose fiance was killed by a gang, and he violently avenges her death. Also used long blade weapons, similar to Pedro. Season 5, episode Public Enemy, Connor O'Brien is a serial killer whose father murdered his mother and was abused as a child and avenged his mother's death by killing his father. So there we have the story of the Brazilian Dexter.
The fact that he's free and now is a popular YouTuber is the part that like doesn't seem real.
I didn't say it was popular. I just said he had a YouTube channel.
Well, I mean, fair, but still, the fact that he has a YouTube channel, you know, I mean, like that just seems too over the top.
I'm sure it is popular. I did see just a little bit of some of it. I don't remember the views on it, but you know,
that's just crazy. And like you said, it's you don't murder is bad, but it is conflicting when he's murdering bad guys.
Right. I mean, all of his victims, even at the wedding, the victims, from what I could find, were all like drug dealers and gang members.
Yeah.
So there you have the life of Pedro, who you can find on YouTube if you are interested.
Okay. So according to the story I just found, he has 28,000 subscribers and over 2.5 million views.
Interesting.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I mean, who doesn't want to hear the story from the man himself?
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious. I'm going to go look it up more. I don't know even when this article is from because it looks to be a translated article. It doesn't give me doesn't have like a published date, but yeah, he was out of jail for 7 months. You said he got out in 2014?
2018.
2018. So this, within the last couple of years, that's amazing.
All right. So there you have it. Of course, all of our sources will be posted on our website, A-Side, B-Side, Square, A-Side, B-Side podcast.square.site. If you would like to help the show, you can do that several ways. You can log on to Apple and you can rate and review. We would love it if you would rate and or review. Also, you can check out all of our social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We also have Buy Me a Coffee. It's buymeacoffee.com/A-Side-B-Side-pod. And again, there's lots of cool merch on the website. I know I'm biased because I created it and designed it, but I think it's pretty cool.
It looks really good.
So you can also get that on the website as well, A-Side, B-Side podcast.square.site. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I'm still kind of reeling from the 60 some deaths and the guy's got a YouTube channel.
I mean, it's not really hard to set up a YouTube channel.
No, it's not. I'm just impressed. I mean, it's such a modern story. I mean, I'm sure if Jack the Ripper had been caught and it was modern days, he'd have a, TikTok or something.
I'm sure, and it would be very popular because everybody would want to know what's going on with Jack the Ripper.
Well, it's like, why do we all, you see a car crash or you hear an alarm go off or, I know when I hear, some sounds outside in the street, I go to the window to see what's going on. It's just human nature.
But there you have it. I believe this coming week, we will also be featured on our friend Kevin Armstrong's podcast Movie Battle. Mm-hmm. And you can check that out, of course, wherever streaming is available. It was great fun to be on that as well. Check out some of the other episodes. It's a really fun concept, pitting similar movies against each other to see which movie comes out on top. So again, check that out on any of your favorite streaming services. And there you go. Here's another episode of A-Side, B-Side Podcast.
Don't forget, bad vibes save lives.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Brooke.
As always, thank you for listening to A-Side, B-Side Podcast. If you enjoy the show, please, if you don't mind, head on over to Apple and leave us a rating or a review. And if you'd like to continue to support the podcast, you can do so by heading on over to Patreon, or you can buy us a coffee, as well as buying merch on our website, asidebsidepodcast.square.site. From Adam and I at A-Side, B-Side Podcast, please remember to wear your mask, social distance if you're around people that don't live in your household, and just be safe and happy. Thanks again from us here at A-Side, B-Side Podcast.